Well, I do have to confess that I've been quite ignorant regarding health matters most of my life. When people are young, 20s, 30s, you're told that you should see the doctor once a year for a checkup and everything. Nobody does. I mean, some people do, but I know I didn't, and I know a lot of people don't. And then when you get a little older, they say, when you get past your 50s and 60s, they say, well, you're supposed to see the doctor every 6 months, which sounds like a good idea. And so actually I started doing it, but still I've been very ignorant about things like blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, things like that. And I remember about 15 years ago when I was still ignorant about such matters. I was visiting at my mother's place, and I was sitting at the kitchen table having coffee, and my brother-in-law came in, my sister's husband. He come in and he's saying to me how the doctors are telling him he's got type 2 diabetes. And I have to admit I was completely ignorant. I had no idea what any type of diabetes was, and I guess that's the secondary kind. Type 1 is where you're really bad off, and you have to take insulin or something like that, but type 2 is controlled with medication. At any rate, I had no idea. This was 10-15 years ago, and he was like mid-30s at the time and not really real old or anything. Somebody that you would never think would have anything wrong with him. He was really buffed out, real muscular kind of guy, worked out in the gym all the time. So I tended to doubt what he was saying about having diabetes, and of course I didn't know what diabetes was, so I had no idea. Then when I got a little older, like as I am now, I started seeing the doctor every 6 months, mostly for a blood test and tell you what the numbers are, what your cholesterol is, and what your A1C level is, which your A1C level is just a record of your blood glucose level, which is your sugar, the sugar in your blood. And so to begin with, I didn't say anything about it, just said you're not diabetic. So I thought, oh, that's good. Well, now, the last time I went, just a few months ago, they said to me, well, you are pre-diabetic, meaning that, if you don't change your diet and exercise habits and things like that, you will be diabetic. And pre-diabetic is anything anything above 5.7 on the A1C scale or above, 5.7 or above. Some people say 5.9, others say 5.7. So in looking back through the records, I was surprised to find out, well, I've been around 5.7 or above for quite some time, for several years, as long as I've been going to this doctor, in fact. So why didn't they say, do something about your diet or something like that? Well, he one time told me, he says he's going to tell me about diet, but he never did. The reason they don't is because they're mostly concerned with cholesterol and prostate matters, things like that. Things that I don't completely go along with, which is another story. The cholesterol and the prostate, that's another story. But getting back to the diabetes, the A1C thing, I decided, well, pre-diabetic is not quite good enough for me, so I decided to do something about it. So I got one of these testing devices, a little test meter, costs $10, then you buy a bunch of test strips for it. It's really economical to use. It costs you 17 cents for a test strip, and they're really quite accurate with today's advanced technologies. You just prick your finger with a little pin, and then you put the test strip in the little drop of blood, and it gives you a reading. And anything that equates to below 5.7 is normal range. Anything above 5.7 is pre-diabetic. Okay, so I was pre-diabetic, And then I decided to, what can I do? Well, diabetes for most people, it's mostly just sugar in the blood is all it is. Sugar and carbs. When you eat carbs, the carbs turn to sugar in the body, and the more sugar you have, the more diabetic you are. So I started going low carb, and the problem with that is when you go low carb, or you can't go no carb, because just about everything you possibly eat has sugar in it. Just about everything you put in your body turns to sugar, but in varying degrees depending on what it is, like potatoes and red beans and stuff, and bread and all that. That's very high carb food, and it puts a lot of sugar in your blood. So you knock out bread and potatoes and beans, stuff like that. Stuff it's not too hard to do. So I went low carb. I even knocked out beer for a month, which is some people can't do that, but I managed to do it. I've gone without beer at various times for a few weeks, a few months, a few years. So I knocked out beer for a month, and I went low carb for about 30 days. And I was able to get the A1C level from pre-diabetic range, above 5.7, back down into below 5.7 into the normal range. So I was happy about that and everything. And it's just nice to know you can have control over these things. And I was, I guess, very fortunate when I was just in my 20s. I just instinctively kind of realized sugar is not a good thing. So I stayed away from sugar most of my life. I don't put sugar in the coffee. I don't even put honey in the coffee, anything with sugar. And I have a can of soda pop once a year, whether I need one or not. Ice cream cone once every 6 months, whether I need one or not. And so I stay away from the sugar. And now I've started reducing the carbs by, I'm not saying I'll never drink another beer again. In fact, I've been having a beer just a few minutes ago. But reduce the amount of things with carbs in it. Beer only has about 4 or 5% carbs, so you can drink beer, but just not a lot. Apples. Who would dream that apples have carbs in them? But they do. They about 4 or 5% carbs. So you can eat apples one a day. It's fine. You just can't sit around and eat tons of them all the time. Because eventually, if you eat all this stuff with high levels of carbs, which turns to high levels of sugar in the body, eventually you will be diabetic. Met a guy at the gym one time who I thought was kind of a kook, but there again, I was naive and ignorant of the facts, and he told me, he was a nurse, and he told me that a lot of people are diabetic and don't realize it, and I just thought, the guy's a kook. He says anybody with a waist above 42 is diabetic. Well, he may very well be correct, because the belly is something that the beer adds to. The belly is a sign that you could be, if you have a big belly, you could be diabetic. At any rate, cutting down on carbs, which cuts down on the sugar, reduces the chances of you being diabetic. So if you're not diabetic, you're very fortunate, because probably about half the country in the United States are diabetic. And they can, it's good news to me that most of them can go from the diabetic range into pre-diabetic or normal range by controlling the diet. So this is something I was very happy to find out, and just wanted to pass it on and share it with you. And if you like finding out about this, and you want to find out about other interesting little tidbits along the healthcare road, be sure and subscribe to this video and share it with your friends and all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.